6 months after the destruction of the Grand Armada, President Julia Morgan stood before the newly formed Galactic Council in a ceremony that would have been impossible to imagine just 1 year earlier. The Great Hall on Nexus Prime had been rebuilt after the hegemony collapse, and representatives from dozens of formerly subjugated species now occupied seats as equals rather than vassals. Morgan addressed the assembly with words that carried the weight of recent history. Humanity had not sought galactic dominance but had been forced to defend themselves against an empire that viewed all other species as resources to be exploited. The war had ended not with human conquest, but with the liberation of civilizations that had been suppressed for millions of years. The irony was not lost on anyone present that Earth had achieved this transformation using technology most species considered obsolete. Nuclear weapons, kinetic bombardment, and biological warfare had proven devastatingly effective against defenses designed to counter more sophisticated energy-based systems. Admiral Lisa Parker oversaw the dismantling of former hegemony occupation forces throughout dozens of star systems. The process required careful coordination to prevent chaos, as billions of beings adjusted to sudden freedom from authoritarian rule. Some species welcomed independence while others feared the responsibility that came with self-governance. Parker ensured that human military forces remained visible throughout the transition period, not as conquerors but as guarantors of the new order. Human ships patrolled trade routes and protected smaller species from aggressive neighbors who might see opportunity in the power vacuum left by hegemony collapse. The alien species that encountered human forces during this period made careful note that Earth's vessels still carried those primitive nuclear weapons that had proved so effective against advanced technology. The humans made no attempt to hide their continued reliance on systems that galactic civilization had abandoned as crude and inefficient. Commodore Jake Morrison led the new Terran exploration fleet on missions that officially focused on scientific cooperation and cultural exchange. His ships carried the latest human technology but also maintained the weapon systems that had made Earth's military reputation throughout the galaxy. Morrison had been present for humanity's first contact with alien civilization and understood better than most how quickly peaceful relations could deteriorate into armed conflict. The exploration fleet was prepared for scientific discovery, but also ready to demonstrate why challenging human interests was inadvisable. Dr. Helen Carter established the Interspecies Cooperation Institute with facilities throughout human space and allied territories. The organization's stated mission was sharing technological knowledge and cultural understanding between species that had never been allowed to interact freely under hegemony rule. Carter's real achievement was more subtle and far more significant. She had discovered that humanity's greatest advantage was not their advanced weapons, but their ability to innovate under pressure and treat every setback as a learning opportunity. This philosophical approach to problem-solving could be taught to other species with remarkable results. The Institute became a center for tactical and technological education, where alien scientists learned human methods of creative adaptation. Species that had relied on standardized solutions for millions of years began developing original approaches to challenges they had previously considered unsolvable. Colonel Matt Johnson transitioned from resistance leader to head of Terran intelligence, responsible for monitoring threats to the new galactic order. His network of human agents and alien allies provided early warning of potential conflicts while gathering information about species that might challenge Earth's position. Johnson understood that humanity's military victories had been achieved through superior tactics and strategic thinking, rather than overwhelming technological advantage. Maintaining this edge required constant intelligence gathering and careful analysis of potential enemies who might develop countermeasures to human methods. The intelligence reports that crossed Johnson's desk painted a picture of a galaxy in transition. Some species were adapting well to freedom and developing their own innovations inspired by human examples. Others remained resentful of their former master's defeat and plotted revenge against the primitives who had destroyed galactic civilization. Dr. Sandra Lewis continued her work in the deepest levels of classified facilities, where humanity's ultimate weapons remained sealed and unused. The Prometheus project had expanded during the war years to include technologies that could threaten entire galactic clusters if deployed without restraint. Lewis reviewed files that contained specifications for devices that could manipulate black holes, create artificial wormholes, and alter the fundamental constants of physics within limited regions of spacetime. These weapons existed not because humanity needed them, but because human scientists could not resist pushing the boundaries of what was theoretically possible. The irony that obsessed Lewis was that humanity had conquered a galactic empire without revealing their true capabilities. The weapons that alien intelligence services desperately sought to understand were primitive by the standards of what humans had actually developed in secret. Commander Rachel Murphy expanded her diplomatic efforts to include species that had never been part of the hegemony, but were now interested in establishing relations with the mysterious humans who had reshaped galactic politics. Her mission was to ensure that Earth's growing influence remained based on voluntary cooperation rather than coercion. Murphy discovered that humanity's reputation had grown far beyond their actual military actions. Species throughout the galaxy told stories of human weapons that could destroy stars and tactical innovations that could defeat any known defense. The reality was impressive, but the mythology was terrifying. This reputation served human interests by deterring potential aggression, while encouraging voluntary alliance with Earth. Species that might have considered challenging human expansion chose cooperation instead when faced with legends of what humanity might be capable of achieving if truly threatened. General Tony Campbell reviewed strategic assessments from throughout human-controlled space while planning for threats that had not yet materialized. The collapse of the hegemony had created opportunities for ambitious species to fill the power vacuum left by the former galactic government. Campbell's greatest concern was not conventional military threats, but the possibility that some species might develop countermeasures to the tactics that had made human victory possible. Earth's advantages were based on innovation and tactical surprise, rather than insurmountable technological superiority. The solution was continued development of new approaches to warfare while maintaining absolute secrecy about humanity's most advanced capabilities. Let potential enemies prepare for nuclear weapons and kinetic bombardment, while never suspecting that humans possessed technology that could manipulate the structure of reality itself. The story concluded with a secret meeting between Admiral Parker and Colonel Johnson in a facility that officially did not exist. They reviewed files containing humanity's most classified capabilities while discussing threats that might eventually require their deployment. The files contained specifications for weapons that could destabilize galactic cores, create cascading, dimensional collapses, and manipulate time itself within limited regions. These technologies had been developed by human scientists who could not resist exploring the ultimate implications of theoretical physics. But the weapons remained unused, not because they were ineffective but because humanity had never needed them. Earth had achieved galactic dominance through tactical innovation and strategic thinking, while their ultimate capabilities remained completely hidden from potential enemies. The final scene showed alien intelligence operatives throughout the galaxy, still trying to understand how humans had achieved such complete victory using apparently primitive technology. They analyzed every battle looking for secrets that would explain human tactical superiority. The aliens never discovered that humanity's most devastating weapons were not the nuclear devices and kinetic bombardment systems that had destroyed the hegemony. The real weapons were the ones that had never been revealed because they had never been necessary. The galaxy now lived in fear of a species that had conquered an empire while concealing capabilities that could threaten the existence of star clusters. And humanity continued developing even more terrible weapons in absolute secrecy, just in case they were ever truly needed. The hegemony Vanguard fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system like an approaching storm. 300 capital ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with energy shields that could deflect plasma cannons and particle beams. War Commander Zexhai stood on the bridge of his flagship and reviewed the tactical data with growing confusion. The primitive humans had somehow defeated two separate hegemony task forces, using weapons that should have been completely ineffective against modern defensive systems. Nuclear explosions and kinetic projectiles were relics from the early days of galactic warfare. No civilized species had used such crude methods for millions of years. Zexai had been chosen to lead the vanguard because of his experience crushing rebellions throughout the Outer Rim. He had fought against dozens of species using advanced hegemony technology turned against its creators. Those rebellions had been dangerous because the rebels understood how to counter hegemony systems with identical hegemony systems. But humans were different. They fought with principles that predated galactic civilization. Their weapons were simple, but they applied them with an efficiency that suggested deep understanding of fundamental physics, rather than reliance on advanced engineering. Admiral Lisa Parker watched the alien fleet approach from her command center, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The facility had been constructed during the Cold War to survive nuclear attack and had been expanded over decades to serve as humanity's ultimate command bunker. Now it would coordinate the defense of Earth against an enemy that possessed technology beyond human understanding. Parker had 50 ships to defend the entire solar system against 300 alien vessels. The mathematical odds were hopeless, but she had spent months preparing for this moment. Humanity's true capabilities were about to be revealed in layers, each one more devastating than the aliens could imagine. Captain Steve Davis commanded the UNS Defiant, humanity's newest and most advanced warship. The vessel looked similar to other human ships from the outside, but its internal systems represented breakthrough technology that had been developed in absolute secrecy over the past decade. The ship's quantum computing core could process tactical data at speeds that exceeded anything in the known galaxy. More importantly, it could adapt to new threats in real time by analyzing enemy patterns and developing countermeasures faster than organic or conventional artificial intelligence could. Davis had been chosen to command the Defiant because of his ability to think creatively under pressure. The ship's AI could outthink any alien computer, but it needed human intuition to guide its tactical decisions. Man and machine working together represented something the galaxy had never seen before. Lieutenant Commander Kate Wilson prepared her squadron for what everyone knew would be a suicide mission. The aliens expected humans to fight according to established galactic warfare principles. They anticipated energy weapons, defensive formations, and attempts to preserve valuable ships and personnel. Wilson's squadron would demonstrate that humans approached warfare from a completely different philosophical foundation. Individual ships and lives were expendable if their sacrifice could achieve strategic objectives. This concept was alien to species that valued survival over victory. On Earth's surface, Major Chris Thompson coordinated planetary defense systems that officially did not exist. The aliens assumed that humans would concentrate their forces in space, where superior technology could be brought to bear most effectively. They had no reason to suspect that Earth itself was the most heavily fortified planet in the solar system. Hidden launch sites throughout every continent contained weapons that could reach orbit and beyond. Nuclear mines had been placed throughout the asteroid belt, disguised as routine mining equipment. Orbital debris had been seeded with devices that could be activated remotely to create kinetic bombardment opportunities. The battle began when the alien fleet reached Mars orbit. Zexai expected the humans to meet his forces in open space, where numerical superiority would be decisive. Instead, the human fleet scattered in all directions using flight patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully calculated to maximize confusion. Davis engaged the lead alien squadron with tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Instead of maintaining formation and exchanging fire at respectful distances, human ships closed to point-blank range and detonated nuclear devices that damaged both sides equally. The aliens watched in horror as human vessels deliberately rammed their ships while triggering massive explosions. This was not warfare as galactic civilization understood it. This was mutual destruction on a scale that no rational species would consider acceptable. Wilson led her squadron against the alien command cluster in what appeared to be a conventional attack formation. The aliens activated their defensive systems and prepared to demonstrate the futility of primitive human weapons against superior hegemony technology. The attack was a feint. Wilson's real objective was to get close enough to the alien flagship to deploy humanity's newest weapon, a quantum virus that could infiltrate alien computer systems and turn their own technology against them. The virus spread through the alien fleet's communication network in seconds, causing navigation failures, weapon malfunctions, and life support breakdowns. Ships that had operated flawlessly for centuries began experiencing cascading system failures that their crews could not understand or repair. Thompson activated Earth's hidden defenses as alien ships attempted to break through human orbital formations. Kinetic bombardment platforms throughout the solar system opened fire with projectiles that had been accelerated to significant fractions of light speed using techniques that the aliens had never encountered. The projectiles were not exotic matter or energy constructs that could be deflected by conventional shields. They were simple chunks of dense metal moving fast enough to punch through any known defensive system by sheer kinetic energy. Engineer Paul Martinez led teams throughout the solar system that were reverse engineering captured alien technology in real time. Human scientists had discovered that alien systems were more vulnerable to modification than their creators realized, because they had been designed for standardization rather than security. Martinez's teams turned alien weapons against their former owners by introducing modifications that caused catastrophic overloads. Plasma cannons exploded when fired. Energy shields collapsed under feedback loops. Navigation systems sent ships into collision courses with their own allies. The turning point came when human forces demonstrated their ultimate advantage over galactic civilization. They were willing to sacrifice everything for victory, while their enemies fought to minimize losses and preserve valuable assets. Entire human squadrons detonated themselves to eliminate single alien capital ships. Human commanders ordered their vessels into situations that guaranteed destruction in exchange for tactical advantages. Human crews volunteered for missions that had no possibility of survival if they offered even small chances of strategic success. The aliens had never faced an enemy that treated warfare as existential struggle rather than political negotiation. Galactic conflicts were typically resolved through limited engagements that demonstrated superior capability without requiring total destruction of the defeated party. Humans fought as if the survival of their species depended on absolute victory. They showed no interest in limiting casualties or preserving infrastructure. They would rather destroy everything than accept defeat. Zexhai ordered his fleet to retreat after losing more than half his ships to an enemy that should have been completely outmatched. The Vanguard had never been defeated by any force in galactic history, but humanity had accomplished the impossible through pure determination and tactical innovation. The retreat sent shockwaves throughout galactic civilization. If the Vanguard could be defeated by primitive humans, what did that say about hegemony and invincibility? More importantly, what other weapons were humans hiding that they had not yet revealed? Parker watched the alien fleet disappear into faster-than-light travel, while knowing that this victory would bring even greater challenges. The galaxy now knew that humanity could not be easily conquered, but they still had no idea what humans were truly capable of achieving. The real war was just beginning. The alien technology was indeed advanced, but it was also rigid. Every ship followed identical design principles. Every weapon system operated on the same energy frequencies. Every defensive screen used the same modulation patterns. The hegemony had apparently standardized their technology across hundreds of species and thousands of years. This standardization was their strength but also their weakness. Human technology was chaotic and diverse by comparison. Every nation had developed different approaches to the same problems. American ships used different systems than Chinese vessels. Russian weapons operated on different principles than European designs. Dr. Helen Carter led the xenobiology team studying captured alien equipment and biological samples. The aliens had provided some basic technology as part of the integration process, but Carter suspected they were being shown only the most primitive examples of hegemony science. What fascinated her was not how advanced the alien technology was, but how predictable it had become. Millions of years of standardization had eliminated the creative chaos that drove human innovation. The aliens had solved most technical problems long ago and saw no need to continue experimenting with alternative approaches. Carter began to understand why the hegemony had been so successful for so long. Their standardized systems allowed perfect coordination across vast distances and different species. But this same standardization meant they had no experience dealing with truly unpredictable opponents. Colonel Matt Johnson coordinated human resistance cells that had formed spontaneously when alien administrators began taking control of key facilities. The resistance was not officially sanctioned, but Admiral Parker made sure they received equipment and intelligence through unofficial channels. Johnson had spent 20 years in special operations and understood guerrilla warfare better than any alien species that had never faced determined insurgents. The hegemony expected cooperation or open rebellion that could be crushed with superior firepower. They had no experience with the kind of persistent, low-level resistance that could bleed an occupying force through thousands of small cuts. Human workers at the mining stations began experiencing mysterious equipment failures. Computer systems crashed at critical moments. Power generators suffered inexplicable overloads. Transport ships developed navigation errors that sent them millions of kilometers off course. The alien administrators suspected sabotage, but could find no evidence of deliberate action. Human workers appeared cooperative and eager to learn hegemony procedures. They followed orders and submitted to alien authority without obvious resistance. What the aliens did not understand was that humans had been sabotaging authority figures for thousands of years. Every human culture had developed techniques for passive resistance that were invisible to outsiders but devastatingly effective over time. Work slowdowns, selective incompetence, and malicious compliance were arts that humanity had perfected long before reaching the stars. Admiral Parker received reports from intelligence sources throughout the solar system while preparing for the confrontation she knew was coming. The aliens were growing frustrated with humanity's slow adaptation to hegemony protocols. Their patience was wearing thin, and soon they would move from administrative pressure to direct military action. Parker had spent the 3 months since first contact implementing contingency plans that had been developed in absolute secrecy. Human ships throughout the solar system were being quietly upgraded with weapon systems that did not exist in any official records. Nuclear warheads were being modified with alien materials to increase their efficiency. Kinetic weapons were being calibrated to target the specific energy frequencies used by hegemony defensive systems. The confrontation began when alien security forces attempted to arrest Johnson and his key lieutenants. The humans had been identified as the source of resistance activities through surveillance systems that could track individual genetic patterns across vast distances. But Johnson had anticipated this move and prepared accordingly. When alien troops stormed the mining station where he was supposedly located, they found nothing but empty corridors and a series of improvised explosive devices that had been constructed from mining equipment and fertilizer. The explosions tore through the alien security team with devastating effect. Their energy shields were designed to deflect plasma weapons and particle beams. They provided no protection against chunks of high-velocity metal propelled by chemical explosives. Morrison received emergency orders to intercept alien reinforcements heading toward the mining stations, with authorization to use any means necessary to protect human personnel. The UNS Endeavour had been secretly upgraded during its recent maintenance cycle with weapon systems that technically did not exist. The alien reinforcement fleet consisted of 12 ships that should have been more than sufficient to crush any human resistance. They approached the mining stations with the confidence of a superior technological civilization facing primitive rebels. Morrison waited until the alien ships were committed to their attack pattern before revealing humanity's first surprise. The Endeavour fired what appeared to be crude nuclear missiles at the alien formation. The aliens activated their energy shields and prepared to demonstrate why such primitive weapons were useless against galactic technology. The missiles detonated in massive electromagnetic pulses that overloaded the alien shields and disabled their targeting systems. Before the aliens could adapt, a second wave of kinetic projectiles slammed into their hulls at significant fractions of light speed. 2 alien ships exploded immediately while 4 others suffered critical damage. The remaining vessels retreated in disorder while transmitting frantic reports to the hegemony command structure. Carter analyzed the battle data with growing excitement and terror. The human weapons had been devastatingly effective because they operated on principles the aliens had abandoned millions of years ago. Nuclear explosions and kinetic impacts were considered crude by species that had developed more elegant energy weapons. But crude did not mean ineffective. The aliens had optimized their defenses against energy weapons and exotic matter disruptors. They had no recent experience defending against weapons that simply smashed into their ships with enough force to pulverize molecular bonds. The battle reports reached the Hegemony Council within hours through faster-than-light communication systems. For the first time in their recorded history, a primitive species had inflicted significant casualties on hegemony forces. The Council faced a situation they had never encountered before. Previous rebellions by member species had used hegemony technology against hegemony forces. The rebels had been more advanced than their opponents, but they fought according to the same principles and could be defeated through superior numbers and coordination. Humans fought differently. They used weapons that galactic civilization had discarded as primitive, but applied them with an efficiency that bordered on genius. They had taken nuclear physics and kinetic energy and scaled them up to levels that could threaten capital ships. The Council authorized deployment of the Vanguard fleet to crush human resistance before other species began questioning hegemony invincibility. They could not allow word to spread that primitive weapons could defeat advanced technology through clever application and tactical innovation. Johnson received new orders through encrypted channels while evading alien search teams in the asteroid belt. Humanity's hidden weapons were being revealed gradually to avoid giving the aliens time to develop countermeasures. Each engagement would show them something new while concealing even more devastating capabilities. The galaxy was about to learn that underestimating human ingenuity was a fatal mistake, and humanity was just getting started. The massive alien ship hung in space like a dark mountain against the stars. Admiral Korthak stood on the bridge of the Dominion's edge and watched the sensor readings with mild interest. Another primitive species had been detected in the Outer Rim territories. This made it the 15th new contact this cycle. His tactical officer approached with the preliminary report. The species called themselves humans and inhabited the third planet of a yellow star system. Their technology was laughably basic by galactic standards: chemical rockets for propulsion, nuclear fission for power, kinetic projectiles for weapons, no energy shields or plasma cannons, no faster-than-light communication systems. Korthak had seen this pattern hundreds of times before. Young species always followed similar development paths. First they discovered fire, then metals, then split the atom, then reached for the stars with clumsy chemical drives. The galactic hegemony had a standard protocol for such encounters. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Endeavour and stared at the massive alien vessel that had appeared near Jupiter without warning. The ship was 5 times larger than anything humanity had ever built. Its hull gleamed with an unknown metal that seemed to bend light around its edges. Morrison had been commanding humanity's first interstellar mission when the aliens made contact. The Endeavour carried a crew of 200 and represented the pinnacle of human engineering. Now it seemed like a toy compared to the alien mothership. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez worked frantically at her tactical station. The alien ship had appeared, without any energy signature or drive flame. One moment empty space, the next moment a kilometer-long vessel sitting there like it had always existed. She ran every scan available, but the alien technology remained incomprehensible. The communication came through on standard radio frequencies. The aliens spoke perfect English with a mechanical tone that suggested machine translation. They identified themselves as representatives of the galactic hegemony and requested a meeting with human leadership. Morrison authorized the transmission to Earth while keeping his weapons powered but not targeted. The aliens showed no hostile intent, but their mere presence demonstrated technological superiority that made resistance seem pointless. On Earth, Admiral Lisa Parker received the first reports from the Endeavour with growing concern. She had spent her entire career preparing for the possibility of hostile alien contact. The Pentagon had dozens of contingency plans for various first contact scenarios. None of them involved aliens who could appear anywhere in the solar system without detection. Parker convened an emergency meeting of the Joint Chiefs and key civilian leadership. The alien message was simple and direct. They offered Earth membership in the galactic hegemony under a protection treaty. In exchange for security and access to advanced technology, humanity would provide resource quotas and accept hegemony oversight of their development. The terms were presented as generous, but Parker recognized them for what they truly were. Vassalage with a friendly face. The aliens spoke of protection, but from what threat? They offered technology but retained control over its application. They promised security but demanded submission in return. Commander Ryan Brooks monitored the proceedings from Luna Base while implementing protocols that had been classified above top secret for 20 years. Project Blackwater involved weapons systems that officially did not exist. Nuclear devices that made hydrogen bombs look like firecrackers. Kinetic weapons that could crack continental plates. Biological agents designed to sterilize entire worlds. The irony was not lost on Brooks that humanity's most devastating weapons were based on the same principles the aliens dismissed as primitive. Nuclear physics, kinetic energy, and biological warfare scaled up to levels that could threaten star systems rather than just cities. Back in space, Morrison watched as more alien ships appeared throughout the solar system. Each arrival was the same impossible transition from empty space to massive vessel. The aliens positioned themselves at key points around Earth, Mars, and the outer planets. Not quite an invasion fleet, but far more than a diplomatic mission. The alien commander who came aboard the Endeavour was humanoid but clearly not human. Taller than any person, with skin that shifted color like oil on water, and eyes that held too much intelligence. It spoke through a translation device that rendered its words in perfect American English. The commander explained galactic civilization with the patience of a teacher addressing children. Hundreds of species belonged to the hegemony. They shared technology, resources, and security under the guidance of the elder races who had achieved interstellar travel millions of years ago. Humanity would be welcomed as junior members with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. They would contribute what they could and receive protection and guidance in return. The alternative was to remain isolated and eventually face extinction, as their star system's resources were exhausted. Rodriguez listened to the conversation while running continuous scans on the alien ships. Something bothered her about their defensive systems. The energy shields that surrounded each vessel pulsed in regular patterns, too regular, like they were following some kind of standardized frequency modulation. She had spent years studying electronic warfare and recognized systematic vulnerabilities when she saw them. The alien technology was certainly advanced, but it was also standardized, predictable, built according to established patterns rather than innovative design principles. Parker made her decision after consulting with world leaders and military advisors. Humanity would accept the protection treaty while maintaining as much autonomy as possible. She knew it was a temporary measure. The aliens would eventually demand greater compliance, and humanity would need to be ready. She activated protocols that had been developed in absolute secrecy by teams that worked in isolation from each other. Each group knew only their small piece of a larger puzzle. The full scope of humanity's hidden capabilities was known to fewer than 50 people worldwide. Morrison signed the treaty documents while privately wondering if he had just surrendered humanity's future to benevolent masters or signed their death warrant. The alien commander seemed pleased with the formalities and promised that hegemony administrators would arrive within the month to begin the integration process. As the alien ships departed with the same impossible transition from presence to absence, Rodriguez compiled her sensor readings into a classified report. The aliens were advanced, but they were not invincible. Their technology followed patterns that could be analyzed and potentially exploited. Brooks received orders to accelerate Project Blackwater while maintaining absolute operational security. The aliens had sensors that could detect human technology, but they were looking for energy signatures and materials that matched known galactic development patterns. Humanity's true weapons were based on principles that galactic civilization had apparently abandoned as primitive. Nuclear weapons, kinetic bombardment, and biological warfare were considered crude by species that had moved on to more elegant solutions like energy manipulation and matter conversion. The aliens had no idea that humanity had spent decades perfecting these crude methods to levels of efficiency that could threaten entire star systems. They saw chemical rockets and assumed limited capability. They observed nuclear power plants and concluded basic understanding of atomic theory. They never imagined that the same species had developed antimatter warheads, relativistic kill vehicles, and synthetic plagues capable of sterilizing worlds. The Protection Treaty bought humanity time to prepare for the war that Parker knew was coming. The galaxy was about to learn that underestimating humans was a fatal mistake. The Hegemony Council convened an emergency session for the first time in over 1,000 years. Representatives from 12 star-faring civilizations gathered in the Great Hall on Nexus Prime to address a crisis that threatened the very foundation of galactic order. A primitive species from the Outer Rim had defeated the Vanguard fleet using weapons that should not have been effective against modern technology. Supreme Chancellor Vorthex reviewed the battle reports with growing disbelief. Humans had achieved the impossible not through superior technology, but through tactical innovations that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They treated their own ships as expendable weapons and their crews as willing sacrifices for strategic advantage. The Chancellor authorized mobilization of the Grand Armada, a combined fleet representing the military might of the entire hegemony. 1,200 ships would converge on the human solar system, with enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. No species in galactic history had ever faced such overwhelming force and survived. Dr. Sandra Lewis worked in the deepest levels of the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, where humanity's most classified projects had been developed over decades of absolute secrecy. Project Prometheus represented technology that could reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy, but had never been tested under combat conditions. Lewis had spent her entire career developing weapons that made nuclear bombs look like firecrackers. Quantum tunneling devices that could ignore any known defensive system, antimatter warheads that could crack planetary crusts, stellar manipulation technology that could destabilize stars and create artificial supernovas. But these ultimate weapons remained in storage while humanity continued fighting with conventional systems that the aliens dismissed as primitive. The real genius of human strategy was allowing enemies to underestimate their capabilities while preparing responses that would exceed all possible expectations. Captain Danny Foster had been assigned to the most dangerous mission in human history. While military forces prepared for the final battle, Foster led diplomatic teams to make contact with individual hegemony member species and offer them something the central government never had: partnership instead of domination. The Corvan Republic had been part of the hegemony for over 2 million years and represented one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy. They had joined the Alliance when it was a mutual defense pact, rather than the authoritarian empire it had become over millennia of gradual centralization. Foster met with Corvan leaders in secret facilities throughout their territory while human intelligence agents provided evidence of hegemony corruption and oppression. The aliens were fascinated by human tactical innovations and began questioning whether their loyalty to the central government was justified. Commander Rachel Murphy coordinated similar diplomatic missions throughout hegemony space. She discovered that many member species harbored resentments against the central authority, but had never seen alternatives to the established order. Humanity offered them hope for genuine independence and self-determination. The diplomatic breakthrough came when the Corvans agreed to provide intelligence about hegemony fleet movements and defensive capabilities in exchange for human military, technology, and tactical training. Other species quickly followed their example as word spread through underground networks that had existed for centuries. Admiral Parker received reports from Foster and Murphy while preparing for the ultimate test of human military capability. The Grand Armada represented everything the galaxy could throw at humanity, but she knew that victory in space was only part of the larger strategic equation. The real battle would be political. If humanity could demonstrate that the hegemony was not invincible, other species would begin demanding changes that could destroy the empire from within. The military engagement was simply the dramatic demonstration needed to inspire wider rebellion. General Tony Campbell established his command center on Mars to coordinate human forces throughout the solar system. The Red Planet had been transformed into a fortress world with underground facilities that could support millions of personnel and enough supplies to continue fighting for decades if necessary. Campbell had access to every classified weapon system that humanity had developed over the past century: nuclear devices that could destroy continents, biological weapons that could sterilize entire worlds, kinetic bombardment systems that could crack planetary cores, quantum manipulation technology that could alter the fundamental properties of matter itself. But the most devastating weapons remained unused because humanity had learned that the threat of unknown capabilities was often more powerful than the demonstration of known ones. Let the aliens wonder what humans were hiding while they prepared countermeasures for weapons they had already seen. The Grand Armada arrived at the edge of the solar system in a formation that stretched across millions of kilometers. 1,200 ships representing the combined military might of galactic civilization moved toward Earth with the confidence of absolute technological superiority. Supreme Admiral Kethvor commanded the Armada from the flagship Eternal Dominion and expected to conclude the campaign within days. Previous rebellions had collapsed when faced with overwhelming force because rebels eventually ran out of ships and personnel. Humans would face the same inevitable defeat once their limited resources were exhausted. But Foster's diplomatic missions had already changed the strategic balance. 4 hegemony member species declared neutrality and withdrew their ships from the Armada. 7 others provided intelligence to human forces while maintaining official loyalty to the central government. The battle began in the outer reaches of the solar system, where human forces had prepared the ultimate demonstration of their tactical philosophy. Captain Morrison commanded a fleet of automated vessels loaded with nuclear devices and programmed to seek out the largest alien ships, regardless of defensive capabilities. The suicide drones appeared primitive compared to sophisticated hegemony technology, but they achieved their objective with devastating efficiency. Each drone carried enough nuclear material to vaporize capital ships and was willing to trade itself for any target of opportunity. Kethvor watched his flagship's escorts disappear in nuclear fireballs while trying to understand how humans had developed such advanced automation systems. The drones exhibited tactical intelligence that exceeded anything in the galactic database, but operated according to principles that seemed almost organic rather than artificial. The breakthrough moment came when human forces revealed their ability to manipulate space-time itself. General Campbell authorized use of quantum displacement weapons that could teleport nuclear devices directly inside enemy ships, regardless of shield strength or defensive positioning. Alien crews found themselves sharing their bridge spaces with fusion bombs that detonated before any defensive measures could be implemented. The technology was theoretically possible according to galactic science, but required computational power and energy generation capabilities that primitive humans should not have possessed. The Armada began retreating after losing over half its ships to weapons that operated outside all known tactical parameters. But Campbell had prepared his ultimate demonstration of human strategic thinking. He ordered the destruction of an entire star system to trap the retreating alien fleet in a massive gravity well. The aliens watched in horror as humans deliberately triggered a stellar collapse that would destroy valuable planets and mining facilities just to eliminate enemy forces. This level of strategic ruthlessness was beyond anything galactic civilization could comprehend or counter. Kethvor transmitted surrender terms, while his remaining ships struggled to escape the expanding gravity anomaly. For the first time in HFY galactic history, a hegemony armada had been completely defeated by a species that the central government had dismissed as primitive and harmless. The news of humanity's victory spread throughout the galaxy faster than official attempts to suppress it. Species that had accepted hegemony dominance for millions of years began questioning whether the central authority was as invincible as they had been told. Lewis sealed the Prometheus files while reflecting on the irony of the situation. Humanity had achieved galactic dominance using technology that was advanced but not incomprehensible. Their real weapons, the ones that could destroy star clusters and manipulate galactic structure itself, had never been needed. The galaxy feared a species that had conquered an empire without revealing their true capabilities. And deep in classified facilities throughout human space, even more terrible weapons continued to be developed, just in case they were ever required.